Hollywood action movies might have been forgettable without John Wayne, but he was more than just a cowboy with a strong moral compass and an action hero. He was a symbol of traditional values and patriotism, so patriotic that Stalin ordered his assassination. However, behind this facade, Wayne struggled with inner turmoil and private guilt for years. Could this be the reason the FBI visited his Newport mansion after his death? What did they discover there? And will it forever alter your perception of him? Those who knew John Wayne, also known as the Duke, would agree that he should have died sooner rather than later. John Wayne was a man who believed he was invincible, possibly as a result of surviving some incidents that should have killed him but didn't. As a result, he developed a stubborn streak. And when we say stubborn, believe us when we say you don't know the half of it. John Wayne loved to drink, but he never thought he drank too much despite the Wayne liked to work. But after filming his scenes in the morning, he would be so inebriated that he would be impossible to work with in the afternoon. As if the heavy drinking wasn't enough, John loved to smoke and had a smoking policy that would make a chimney look ineffective. He would smoke a pack of cigarettes every day and had a mean party boy. The women he married in each of his marriages all said the same thing, even though his coworkers knew he was an owl, but they dared not confront him. Lifestyle streak in him as well. Ultimately, the alcohol and the cigarettes caught up with him. In 1964, when he was still at the top of his game, after his breakthrough in the 1939 movie, Stagecoach, Wayne was diagnosed with lung cancer. The news was devastating, but the worst part was that the doctors found the cancer too late, already in its final stages. Wayne's solution was straightforward. He had to have surgery to remove his entire left lung and 4 of his ribs. The procedure was risky, but Wayne didn't care about the risks. The man asked the doctors to do what needed to be done, and 10 days later, they declared that Wayne was cancer-free. Wayne celebrated his newfound freedom by continuing to smoke and drink, but this time, he switched to luxury cigars. He then went to work and made a number of successful films before cancer struck him again. This time stomach cancer. The hard drinking days had finally taken their toll, and Wayne passed away from stomach cancer in 1979. But even in death, the action continued to follow John Wayne. When the FBI stormed his mansion, they discovered his old will, which stated that John left an estate worth $6.85 million. This was a lot of money, but many people were surprised because they thought that given his work history, he was first given a starring role in the 1930 film The Big Trail, he should have more wealth. However, his son-in-law, Donald LaClava, knew why Jay's money had drastically decreased. And we'll get to both of them. The reason for this is that in his will, which was 27 pages long, Wayne listed $5.75 million in personal property and $100,000 in income from his holdings. Wayne was married 3 times and divorced twice. His first wife, Josephine Alicia Sands, had 4 children for him. His second, the fiery and dramatic Esperanza Bauer, almost killed the Duke, and his meek Paralette also had children. John Wayne placed a portion of his estate in trust for his first wife, Josephine Alicia Sands, and directed that the trust be paid Josephine $3,000 every month. The remaining estate, which was placed in trust, was to be divided among the 4 children he had with her. In addition, Duke ensured that her children would receive $5,000, multiplied by the age difference between them and 21. As a result, his firstborn child, Michael, who was 44 at the time the will was read, received $115,000. He also received Jay's holdings in Jay's production company, Bat Jack Productions Incorporated. This could be because he has been a top official in addition to being Batjack for many years. Michael is the 3rd named administrator of the estate. Was he John Wayne's favorite? Parr's 3 children received the same $5,000, multiplied by the difference between their ages, and he left her nothing in his will. This left many wondering why Parr received nothing. She was the last woman he married, and she suffered because she was a part of Duke's life. She met Duke during one of the darkest periods of his life, after his second wife. Because she suspected him of having affairs with his co-stars, Esperanza almost shot him in the head. They went to court to get a divorce, and unlike Josephine, his first wife, who was private during her divorce from him, Esperanza wasn't. She felt denigrated and let loose her mindless rage on the man she had once loved. She discussed Duke's private affairs in public and called him cruel. John Wayne had to defend himself and also shot back at Esperanza, calling her a drunk. Wayne was supposed to be searching for places they could use as sets, so he decided to check out local sets. However, The set itself didn't catch his attention, but Parr, who was in a scene where she was wearing a low-cut costume and dancing a sultry dance, was in it. Duke introduced himself, and the two started dating, which eventually led to marriage on the day Duke finalized his divorce from Esperanza. Regretfully, life with Duke wasn't what Peller had anticipated, because he was constantly busy and never had too much time for her. It quickly became lonely for the woman who had left her culture and home country for a place that had been unfamiliar to her for a long time. At times, he also insisted that she accompany him on his travels, which didn't help Pilar's nervous system. She was unable to fall asleep, and the smallest sound made her jump in fear. Eventually, she came to a solution for herself and started taking sleeping pills. It was a mistake, but she genuinely thought it was the only option available to her. She cut her own wrists in an attempt to end her life, but she didn't. The crew members discovered her, but instead of following them and sending her to the hospital, Duke stayed behind to work and hired nurses to accompany her. Then, as if that experience wasn't terrible enough, Duke continued to cheat on her. Parr handled it better than the other wives, but even she had her limits. She separated from him but didn't file for divorce. After their split, Duke spent time with his former secretary Pat Stacy, and even despite being left out of his will, Parr remained one of the Duke's strongest supporters. She wrote a memoir about him, stating that he was 80% a good man, but that people in the media wanted to focus on the 20% that he didn't have. She acknowledged that being the Duke's wife and family was difficult because he wanted them to be with him and travel when he traveled, which made things unstable. But in contrast to what she later disclosed, Parr claims that she got pregnant while Duke's divorce from Esperanza was still pending. Duke didn't want to start another scandal and wanted to protect his reputation, so he told Parr to end the pregnancy, which she did. Or did Duke provide for her in some other way? The fiery Esperanza also didn't receive anything after the divorce. From Duke Esperanza, she began to drink excessively and spiraled out of control. When she was 40 years old, she locked herself in her room in a hotel in Mexico and drank herself to death. Would she have received anything if she had been alive? Perhaps Donald Lava was alive and received nothing. Duke had specifically ordered Lava to be excluded, and even Lava didn't object. This was the price he paid for betraying Duke. He wouldn't be the first person to betray Duke in the manner that he did. He had an affair with Marlene Dietrich, a woman who was irresistible. When she first saw Wayne on the set of their movie, Seven Sinners, she took in his magnificently built six-frame and decided that she was going to have him in one way or another. The Duke didn't need much convincing or even seduction. He fell head over heels for her, and the two developed a relationship that was more passionate than his marriage to Josephine, his first wife at the time. Josephine suffered while waiting for Duke to come home and eat the food she had prepared for him. Duke, on the other hand, was living the party boy lifestyle, getting wasted, and getting caught up in Dietrich. He trusted her, and as his wealth increased, he asked her for advice on how to manage it. He wasn't the most cautious person and needed a manager for his money, so Dietrich put Beau Roos in charge of her millions and asked Duke to do the same. Beau was well liked in Hollywood and managed Joan Crawford's accounts. As a result of his pedigree, charming personality, and flamboyant lifestyle, he was able to reassure his clients that he knew what he was doing. He became close to Duke, who was confident that he would have more millions of dollars. However, things took a turn for the worse when one of the many investments he made for him received a string of bounce checks and foreclosure notices. Wayne, who isn't known for being subtle, gave Beau a piece of his mind, and Beau pledged to do better. But he had one thing about Wayne that he used against the Duke Beau. He kept making mistakes, investing $700,000 of Wayne's money in Panama, which Wayne lost, then another $1 million, which was a bust too. John Wayne didn't realize he was broke until he and his wife Parr went to a restaurant at Saks Avenue in New York and accrued a $3.500 bill. He instructed the clerk to charge Beau, but Beau didn't pay, and 63 months later, Wayne received an due to the restaurant's past due notice. He called Beau and asked him to pay, but Beau refused. Duke was furious, but he's not the kind of person to rile people up. He sent his secretary, Mary Street John, to Beau, and Beau tried to persuade her to return, but Mary was uncooperative and insisted on seeing her boss's file and portfolio. When she saw it, she was shocked to see that nearly nothing remained in Wayne's accounts. She informed Wayne, and Wayne took action himself. He asked Beau what was happening, and Beau admitted Duke didn't have much money left. Duke asked him how much, and Beau said he needed time to figure it out. Duke gave him time, But Bo was just stalling. After a few weeks, he showed Duke what he had, which was a fat load of nothing. Duke was upset and poor, but he shared some of the blame. Bo knew Duke wasn't the type to check his account statements to track his money, so he took advantage of the fact that Duke wanted to sue. But there was a problem. If he did that, it would indicate that he wasn't. He was broke too, and there was nothing Bo could get from him. Duke was devastated, but he wasn't the type to give up, so he got up and worked really hard. Unfortunately, his relationship with his wife Par, whom he eventually separated from, didn't improve because he didn't leave anything in his will for her. But there are rumors that he had a separation agreement with her and provided for her in that agreement. Didn't have such an arrangement with Lava, his son-in-law. After that incident with Bo, Duke got his money back, but he needed someone he could trust to handle his wealth. So he called his son-in-law Lava and assigned him the responsibility of handling his accounts and making conservative investments. Whatever Lava did, he shouldn't lose money, and he didn't have the grace to tell Duke until 1965, when Duke traveled to Dallas and spent $30,000 in a store. When the bill arrived, Lava was incensed and claimed Duke didn't have that much. We may not know what Duke would have made if his assets had not been poorly managed, but we are certain of the other items that the FBI discovered in his mansion. Lava had invested in bad real estate, dry oil wells, and more. Duke looked at him, shocked or angry, and he simply told Lava, "There better well be money in the bank to pay these bills." There wasn't. Lava had lost money again, so he immediately fired Lava and removed him from the will. When John Wayne was younger, he always wanted to join the army. He decided to enroll in the U.S. Naval Academy, but his poor grades prevented him from being accepted. Nevertheless, his desire to serve remained, and when America entered World War II, Wayne was eager to serve. However, he was initially exempted due to his age, and his enlistment was postponed. Despite this, Duke refused to give up, writing to John Ford that he wanted to enlist and even asked. Wayne was thrilled when he was reclassified as draft eligible, because he was the only A-list actor under contract with Republic Studios, and they didn't want to lose him. However, Wayne threatened to resign from his contract, and Herbert J. Yates, the president of Republic, threatened to sue him. Wayne was stuck and missed out on serving because of this, but he still had a plan. He applied to the Office of Strategic Services, which would eventually join the CIA. He applied to be one of their spies, but they didn't stop there. After he was rejected by the OSS, Wayne started touring U.S. hospitals and bases in the South Pacific. The OSS saw that this provided him with the ideal cover, so they hired him and assigned him a covert mission. They asked him to check out General Douglas MacArthur, the Southwest Pacific Area Commander, and his staff to see if they were interfering with the OSS's work, and Wayne performed his duties effectively, and thus received an OSS Certificate of Service. Nevertheless, Duke never fully forgiven himself, because he carried the guilt of not serving his country when it needed him the most. He attempted to make amends by making films that backed American actions when doing the opposite had become the norm. Duke also led the charge against actors who had communist actors when the U.S. government started looking for them and refused to collaborate with anyone he knew. Stalin hated him so much that he ordered a hit on the Duke since he was thought to be associated with communism, which made him unpopular with his peers. The Duke didn't care, he just cared about himself and his family.